Good evening. How's everybody doing? All right, turn with me to Genesis chapter 9 is where we're at tonight. Joanne Shetler wrote a book called And the Word Came with Power, and it was about her experience of going to the Philippines and, experiencing just a culture, just kind of a culture that had been completely cut off from society, completely set apart for probably hundreds of years, where they just kind of developed their own beliefs. And whenever a group of people separates themselves from society, from other groups of people, they kind of find themselves off in the bushes by themselves. What happens is, in that experience, they begin to experience, I guess, demonic activity, and demons begin to kind of control their lives, and they start to practice something that's called animism. And it's really bizarre, because if you look at the world we live in, from the tip of South America up into the north slope of Alaska, where there's tribes kind of packed in there, sparsely crazy people that live in the ice. And then you have people all the way up in the mountains of China, all the way in the northern mountains of the Himalayas, just crazy places in the world where they're separated from other people, and they all do the same thing. They all worship demons. They all practice what is called animism. These demons are represented by animals that they encounter or interact with. And really bizarre, this lady, Joanne Shetler, going to the Philippines, kind of encountered a culture that was like that. They worship the demons. They had a witch doctor. Every culture has a shaman or a witch doctor that kind of talks to the demons for them and whatnot. And when she was engaged in this culture, trying to share the gospel with them, she learned their language. Her and another lady missionary were it was really bizarre, because they sent these two ladies out in the middle of this jungle to meet with these people, and they're the only ones that went. And as they were talking to them about the Bible and trying to get them to believe in God, they weren't having a lot of success until she started showing them a genealogy. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and He made Adam. And Adam had Seth, and Seth, and just went down the line, starting to go down the line. And one of the natives just jumped up, and he was so excited. And he's like, "You mean we didn't come from the banana and the papaya and the warthog?" They had this tradition that the warthog and somehow the banana got together or something, and the papaya mixed in there, and then the first human was born out of that. And so he was just blown away that we can actually know where we came from. That God, and so he grabbed that paper, and he went enthusiastically to his whole tribe, shared that with them, that we came from God, who in the first man's name was Adam, and went through the whole thing with them, and they all got saved. It was that simple, just something that simple, to show them that they had an origin, that they had a beginning. And you look shocked when I said that, the banana and you look shocked. Because that's what they're teaching our kids at the school. That like lightning hit a pool of water that had dirt and stuff in it, and they, complex amino acids and stuff started to swim around and magically turned into the first living cell, which magically turned into you. It was from the goo to the zoo to you. Is the banana thing so far-fetched? I mean, you think about what they teach us, it's ridiculous. I mean, honestly, to think about that we actually have come from somewhere. And what is amazing, and this is just super fascinating, is that anthropologists, Far East archaeologists, and people who are interested in the origins of nations, those who study such things, still today say the far most authority on where every nation came from is Genesis chapter 10. Oh, we don't believe in the Bible, but this map so accurately depicts where all the different nations of the world came from. I don't understand that. But we saw that kind of last time as we saw Noah and his sons getting off the ark. And Noah and his sons were all related. And we all come from Noah and his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And so therefore we are all related. It's all brothers and sisters here, right? We are related through Noah. And if not through Noah, of course, nowhere else. Because you'd have to be related to Noah to be alive today. Everyone else drowned. But farther beyond that, we're also related to Adam and Eve. But it says in verse 18, that's where we left off last time, Genesis 9, verse 18, "Now the sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Ham was the father of Canaan." That's bizarre. Why did it list Canaan all of a sudden? "These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated." And so the Bible says it very clearly there. From these three guys, the whole earth was populated. And now that seems a little bit, hard to grasp until we start getting into who came from these guys. But first we have to take a little detour down into a very dark place. Okay, you guys ready for a little tour through a dark place? And that was really the only thing that we ever saw of Noah that was not good. And it's in Genesis chapter 9, verse 20. It says, "Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard." So far, so good. He decides, we're in the new world, I'm going to plant a vineyard. And so he plants this vineyard, but he has a motive behind this. And I don't blame Noah. I mean, could you imagine getting off of this big ark, all of your friends, you're 600 years old. You've been around the block a few times, right? All of your friends, all your acquaintances, people that you grew up and went to school with when you were a kid. A kid could have been up to 100 years old in their thing. They could have gone to school for 100 years. Who knows? But just all the people you got to know so well, and none of them would come on the ark with you. God would leave the door open for 7 days. You're sitting there waiting, you're praying, you're waiting for one person just to come into the ark. And nobody does, and then God closes the door, and then the floodwaters come upon the earth, wipe everybody out that you loved and cared for, wipe all the technology. And we don't know what type of technology they had. All we know is that when we blow rocks apart, that we find laser cut things, we find spark plugs, we find hammers that are the sulfur amount within the chlorine amount within the iron is something that we could not form with our current technology. It was something that was smelted in a very highly advanced environment, and yet here's this petrified wood handle sticking out of it, and the rock. If you want to Google it, London hammer, it's pretty fascinating. They found it in London, Texas in the 50s, a hammer. When they broke a rock open, there was a hammer inside, a very nice hammer. A hammer that didn't rust. It was, because of the composite of the material that it was made of, it didn't rust. It was a very, very fascinating find. But there's beyond that, you look up op arts, you find that there are all kinds of out-of-place artifacts, or artifacts that were either highly technologically made, batteries, spark plugs they find in rocks, all kinds of things. And we don't know what kind of society was flooded when this world was flooded. We don't know how advanced their technology was, but we assume, just from the weird things that we find, that they were a pretty civilized nation. And could you imagine, smartphones, everything else, and maybe they had that, we don't know. Maybe they had something more than that. But can you imagine going from our society where you are addicted to that phone, and the next thing you know, you're looking up London hammer right now, aren't you? The next thing you know, your battery ran out about halfway on the ark. You're like, service is gone. My apps don't work anymore. My screen's broken. Oh no, and so Noah's freaked out. He walks out into this world. It's just like nothing he's ever experienced. For 600 years he's lived. 600 years he's built knowledge. 600 years, and now he's like, you know what I know how to do? I know how to make a good bottle of Chardonnay. That's what I know how to do. I know how to make, and I'm going to have to plant myself a vineyard. Those seeds left on the ark, he went and got some seeds. He planted the best seeds he could find, and he planted a vineyard. And then it says, verse 21, he drank of the wine and was drunk and became uncovered in his tent. And this is where it gets bizarre. And Ham, the father of Canaan, we keep seeing Canaan. Why do we keep seeing Canaan? Before it said it was Shem, Ham, and Ham was the father of Canaan. the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Now, this is a really strange word structure within the Hebrew. And just like it's kind of a different way to think about it. Remember when it says Adam knew his wife? Obviously he met her before. It's talking about something else. It's not saying he slept with his wife, but it's saying he knew his wife. And when we look at this this phrase within the Hebrew, in Leviticus chapter 18, if you read through the chapter, you become very familiar with this uncovering of a person's nakedness. Don't uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. You shall not uncover it. It is your father's nakedness. So uncovering the nakedness of your father's wife is your father's nakedness, it says. It talks about don't approach your sister to uncover her nakedness. She is your sister. Do not approach your mother's sister to uncover her nakedness. It is your close relative. And he just goes on and on and on about uncovering nakedness. And then it says, moreover, likewise, you shall not lie with your neighbor's wife. And so you kind of get the idea that this uncovering of nakedness is much like Adam knew his wife. To uncover somebody's nakedness was to sleep with them in some way. And yet here it says, and this is where it gets strange, because it says, and Ham, the father of Canaan, there it is again, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Now, what's so bad about, I looked in the tent and I saw my dad naked. Ooh, gross, 600-year-old man. Could you imagine the wrinkles? Could you imagine? And then it says, but Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, went backwards, and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. So by the way this sounds, it just sounds like he was naked, and he saw him, went to his brothers. The idea behind telling his brothers is with delight. It kind of is what it's saying. With delight, he told his brothers that he saw his father's nakedness. And then they went backwards and covered their father's nakedness. But it's just so strange how this whole thing folds out. Verse 24 says, so Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him. Done to him? Is it because he told on him that he was naked in his tent drunk? Or is it because, what is this? But then he said, this is weird, cursed be Canaan. A servant of servants shall he be to his brethren. And he said, blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. So all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. So Noah almost lived 1,000 years. Still, even after the flood, he lived another 350 years. Okay, so let's just I don't want to get too deep into it, but what does it mean that he uncovered his father's nakedness? And then why didn't God curse Ham? And why does it keep bringing up Canaan? He curses Canaan. Now, one possible explanation, I'm not going to be dogmatic about this, but one thing that makes sense is, and a lot of scholars believe this is a possibility, is that what happened here, even though it doesn't tell us in detail, is that somehow Ham slept with his mother or his father's wife, and Canaan was the offspring, and that's why God cursed him. Because it always lists Canaan with Shem, Ham, and Japheth as part of the offspring somehow. And I'm not going to, get too deep into that. It's just a little bit bizarre, isn't it? Why would he curse Canaan? What did Canaan have to do with this whole thing? It's very possible that his mother was found pregnant, and he said, that boy, Canaan, is going to be cursed. It'd be sad. But, it just goes to show you that even after the ark, and you kind of feel that way sometimes, don't you? If I could just get on an ark, if I could just go up into the mountains and seclude myself from all these jerks, then everything would be wonderful. I could just live in my little Christian, holy, happy place up in the woods, with me and my kids, and we just have a holy family until Canaan until Ham, until something goes wrong. Because that's the thing, is you can take the sinner out of the sinful place, but he's just going to make wherever you put him a sinful place too. And what's really sad about this whole thing is that it starts out with Noah seeking to escape and just becomes drunk, He just wants to escape. Just wants to unplug, just wants to unwind, wants to be clouded from whatever it is that's troubling him. And we do that, don't we? That's what we do as human beings. We seek some sort of escape. And I think that when we have trouble, it's been interesting because I've been dealing with this a lot lately, just with different people and in different ways. And, counseling, marriage counseling. It's really bizarre, but people have a lot of pain. You notice that in life? There's a lot of pain that people struggle with. And what's weird is, women have a lot of pain, and they seem to carry it around. It's a lot of, hurts, and sometimes they can repress things, but a lot of times women just carry it around, and it just eats them up. Men are different. Men don't carry it around. Actually, what men do, well, they carry it around, but what they do is they push it really, really deep. They shove it so deep that they don't even realize it's there. And a man can do that. He can shove pain and bitterness and, past failures and hurts so deep inside, and he doesn't even realize there's something wrong with him. He's just like, hey, I'm okay. I feel fine. I don't know what's going on. I feel fine. But why is my life unwinding? Why do I have this rage all of a sudden? Why is this going on? And what it is it's just something that is inside that's kind of eating away. And both women and men can have this, but men, it just kind of seems to come up on them all of a sudden. Women tend to, it seems to be more at the surface. But the reality is what we try to do is we try to take that pain, whatever it is, whether it's deeply buried or whether it's up at the surface, and we do a lot of things that are really inconvenient for our life because of it. We unplug from relationships. We get drunk. We do drugs. We watch too much TV. Why? Well, I want to escape my life, and I want to live Jerry Seinfeld's life for an hour, and then I want to live, Adrian Monk's life for an hour. I don't know any current programs, so sorry, but I just want to indulge in this person's life for an hour, 2 hours, a movie, television program, whatever. I'm going to binge watch something, 27 hours straight till I feel sick, because I just want to escape my own reality. And people do that all the time. I think all of us probably do it to a degree in some way or another. And yet, why do we do that? It's because we have pain inside that needs to be dealt with. And yet, the reality is that Jesus dealt with that when He died on the cross. When Jesus died on the cross, He bore all of our sorrow and all of our pain. And yet, I think that a lot of times we don't get rid of our pain because we kind of like it. It's kind of a comfort to us, isn't it? The past hurts, the past failures, the wrong things that people did to us, we just like to hold on to those because it does feel good to be bitter, doesn't it? It feels good to hold on to that. It feels good to drown it out with alcohol or drown it out with whatever, because I can escape it for a few minutes and then I can go right back to it. And I can remember all the things that happened, and I remember the exact words. You're bitter when you remember details. Bitterness remembers details. And that's really sad. Because it does plague our life, doesn't it? We've rehearsed it so many times. I said this, and then she said that, or he said that, or they did this to me. And it went down like this, and I remember it, and I've rehearsed it so many times in my mind that I'm actually becoming that. And so what do? How do I get rid of that? How do I heal myself of that pain that keeps me running to the alcohol, or keeps me running to the TV, or keeps me running to whatever it is that I escape with? And that is to acknowledge it. Sometimes it's easy to acknowledge. I was talking to a guy the other day, and he's like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know what's wrong with me. And I said, what about this incident that happened 2 years ago? He's like, I guess it could be that. I guess it could be that. See, what happens to us is oftentimes when we're hurt, we unplug from relationships or people. And I said, you have to confess. And this is the difficult part, because a lot of times when we're bitter or something bad has happened to us or something confusing, and like Noah, all of his friends are dead. And he's mad, maybe mad at God a little bit, maybe mad at them. Why didn't you get on the ark? I told you to get on the ark and you didn't get on. Why aren't you doing what I want you to do? Why are you destroying your life? Why are you doing that? And we become bitter about that, and that's the problem, is because what bitterness does is it separates us from God. And that's not good, right? Why does it separate us from God? Well, because God isn't bitter. It's not that God is like, oh, you're bitter, I'm out of here. It's like we cover ourselves in bitterness and we can't see God through it. And so how do we get rid of that? How do we deal with that? There's only one way to do it that I'm aware of. And that is to identify it first. And sometimes we have to pray that prayer of the psalmist, search me and know me. And expose any wicked way in me. Is there any wicked way in me? And lead me in the way everlasting. So when we find out what that wicked thing is, what that poison is, what that bitterness is. Because bitterness is, again, it's like drinking poison and expecting the person we're mad at to die. That's what bitterness is. Bitterness is allowing the person who did something to you to continue to hurt you. And forgiveness is freedom. To forgive and say, you know what? I'm letting go of obligation. I'm letting them go of obligation. I am just saying, okay, you know what? Jesus paid for it all. To let go. And then allow God to heal that by confessing it. Jesus, I know this bitterness falls short of your glory. You forgave all sin when you died on the cross. You died for it all. And so I give this bitterness to you. It falls short of your glory. It's sin. To confess that it's wrong, and then to ask God to put forgiveness in your heart. Because it's not something that we can muster up, is it? So what happens? It perpetuates itself. So instead of being a husband, or instead of being a wife, or instead of being a father or a mother, we spend all our time watching TV, or drinking, or escaping, or running away into the garage to tinker. It's so easy to do that as a person because we want to escape. And so when we free ourselves of bitterness and we free ourselves of those pains, it helps us to engage people. Because what happens when we disconnect? Canaan happens. Ham's like, Dad's checked out ever since the ark. Ever since the ark landed, Dad's checked out. I don't know what's going on with him. He's not here anymore. He's drinking his vineyard, wine. And it maybe bitterness in his heart drives him to just allow it to take over his life, and he does some despicable thing we don't even really know. The Bible's not too clear on it. Probably good, because it's just kind of disgusting if you think about it. But drives him to sin. I think that the families would be so much healthier and people would be so much healthier if we could just free ourselves from all of that and just grab hold of Jesus and say, Jesus, I need you. Like we sang just a minute ago, I need you every second. I need you. That's kind of a heavy way to enter into Genesis chapter 10, but William F. Albright, he's Jewish by birth, but not a very religious person. He looks at the Bible as kind of a historical book, and yet for not being a person who would endorse the Bible as inspired, he sees it as something that is to be trusted historically and archaeologically. He is actually the foremost archaeologist of our time for Middle Eastern studies. I mean, the guy was amazing and highly decorated and noted as the best or the most knowledgeable Middle East archaeologist of our time. And this is what he said. Again, not believing in the inspiration of Scripture, he said this: "The 10th chapter of Genesis stands absolutely alone in ancient literature without a remote parallel, even among the Greeks, where we find the closest approach to a distribution of peoples in genealogical framework. The Table of Nations remains an astounding, accurate document." This is what a non-believer says about Genesis chapter 10. And still today, if you were to take a study on the origins of peoples, anthropology, they would take you to Genesis chapter 10 and say, well, this seems to be a pretty accurate outline as to where everybody came from. And yet it seems to escape them somehow that these 4 men and their wives landed on an ark, and then everybody was born out of these people and dispersed from this one area. And yet, anthropologically, you can prove it. It's amazing. But what it does is it outlines where everybody in the entire world pretty much came from. And you'll probably see yourself here as we go through this. It says, "Now this is the genealogy of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And sons were born to them after the floods." The floods, they didn't have any sons before the flood, regardless of what the movie tried to show, whatever that stupid movie was with Russell Crowe. It says, "The sons of Japheth," you love this, Gomer, I think it was Gomer Pyle, Magog, Medea, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tyrus. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tyrus. So Japheth is the father of the Indo-European peoples, the people who stretch from India to the shores of Western Europe. And you see on your little map there, it kind of names all the people, kind of going up there through Asia over, Gomer actually was the Germanic people came from Gomer. And so you can see he's kind of there in what would be probably Ukraine area is where it says Gomer on this map, but he spread over towards Germany, and then his sons would kind of populate Spain, France, and those Celtic regions would settle all those regions. Magog, Tubal, and Meshach, these were settlers of the far north. Meshach was the father of the Scythian people. And the Scythian people, they basically terrorized Asia from basically the Caspian Sea all the way to China, and they just ruled that region. Scythians were the people who they could ride on a horse and shoot right-handed or left-handed with their short bows. They would shoot birds out of the air in mid-flight while riding the back of a horse, right-handed or left-handed. They were amazing with the bow, and that's what they were known for. And so they were awesome in war. You didn't want to mess with the Scythians. And those are the people who became what is current-day Russian people, the white Russian people. And then, and you're going to see also Magog, Tubal, Meshach. These are all named in the Ezekiel 38 prophecy. Remember the Ezekiel 38 where these nations, along with all the Arab nations, are going to come against Israel in the last days. It tells us there in Ezekiel 38. It names a lot of these same people. That's why in Ezekiel 38 it doesn't say the Russians and the Ethiopians and the Libyans are going to come against Israel. But it says, it gives the names of, back here in Genesis, chapter 10, their ancient names, and it talks about these peoples are the ones that are going to come against Israel in the last days. And so that's probably the next thing on the prophetic clock as we see the approach of Jesus coming. The Magog invasion could happen before or after Jesus comes back. It's difficult, for the rapture It's difficult to tell. Medea, I guess is how you say that. From his son Japheth came the ancient Medes and the people who populate now Iran and Iraq. The peoples of India also came from this branch of Japheth's line. And so if you are European, if you are Middle Eastern, Asian, probably come from Japheth's line. I think probably most of the people in America are strongly on this line. Yeah. Japheth. Oh, well, it just depends. I mean, because Gomer would be German, Magog, Tubal, Meshach would be Russian, Medea would be Medes, and then Javan would be the ancient Greeks. Those seafaring ways described in Genesis chapter 10, verse 5. And so he goes deeper into the sons of Gomer, were Ashkenaz, Ribtha, and even in Germany today, there are the Ashkenazi Jews. They get their lineage way back to this. Genesis chapter 10, they say that they're descendants of Ashkenaz and became Jewish, and they're in Germany. Ribtha and Togarmah. Togarmah would be, from the sons of Gomer, would be the Armenians, where we get the Aramaic language, which is, if you read Hebrew or if you look at Hebrew, when you look at Hebrew letters, they're actually Aramaic letters, and the Hebrew words used with Aramaic letters rather than Hebrew letters. The ancient Hebrew letters were kind of more like pictographs, but they transferred over to mix these two languages. They're very similar. But Togarmah also was, one of the ones who would settle the area of Turkey, current day Turkey. At least they claim that. Verse 4, the sons of Javan were Elisha, Tarshish. Tarshish, these people, Javan, this branch, it's thought had gone towards Britannia, Kittim, Donium, I don't know how to pronounce these. And from the coastland peoples of the Gentiles were spread into their lands. And so it calls them the Gentiles, everyone according to his language, according to their families, into their nations. And so the sons of Javan were geographic names that spring from the names in the chapter abounding in linguists. Linguists have no trouble seeing the connection between Kittim and Cyprus, Rhodium and Rhodes, Gomer and Germany, Meshach and Moscow, Tubal and Tobolsk, whatever that is, just Russian. And then the descendants of Ham. Verse 6, it says, the sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. That's awesome. Ham has a son named Put. That's kind of a cool name. And so Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. And these are the people who populated Africa and the Far East. Cush has early descendant who founded Babylon, Nimrod, we're going to see in just a moment, and others founded Ethiopia. Mizraim would be Egypt, that region. Put refers to Libya and northern Africa. And all these nations still use a lot of these names within their culture. And that's, when you go to these cultures, they know that they come from this, and a lot of times it will be in their, part of these names will be within their, even their family names. It's interesting. I don't know if you're an old Christian, maybe you remember Togarmah and Key. Remember that? Togarmah and Key, the guy has his name is from this ancestry all the way back, Canaan refers to the people originally settled in the land. We think today of Israel, what we think of as Palestine. These were the Canaanites. Of course, these are people who were cursed, that God had cursed. And basically, these people were completely given over to wickedness, and that's why Israel would drive them out. So the sons of Cush, it says, verse 7 through 12, the sons of Cush were Sheba, Havilah, Sabata, Ramah, Sabteka, and sons of Ramah were Sheba and Dedan. Cush begot Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one on the earth. He was, now notice this, he's a mighty one on the earth, He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, Calais, and the land of Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Calah, and Rezin, between Nineveh and Calah. That is the principal city. So basically what it's saying there, it's the principal city, meaning that these are all suburbs and it's all one giant metropolis. And that's what Nineveh was. So Cush has a son Nimrod, and he's, it says he's a mighty one in the earth. But this isn't saying, in the Hebrew it's a negative thing. It's not like, this guy was a stud muffin, right? That's what we would say. This guy was not a stud muffin. This guy was a wicked man. He was mighty in the earth, and think about that. There's things that are heavenly that are good, and there's things that are earthly that are bad. And he was everything that was earthly. He ruled over Babel, which was one of the first organized rebellions of humans against God. And his name Nimrod itself, it's kind of like a bad name to call somebody, right? Nimrod. But the word means, let us rebel. That's what Nimrod's name means. Let us rebel. And he's a mighty hunter before the Lord. The context shows it's not a compliment of Nimrod. The idea is that Nimrod was offensive before the face of God. He was a hunter of men's souls against the Lord, is kind of the idea. The Jerusalem Targum says this: He was powerful in hunting and wickedness before the Lord, for he was a hunter of the sons of men. And he said to them, Depart from the judgment of the Lord and adhere to the judgment of Nimrod. Therefore it is said, as Nimrod, the strong one, strong in hunting and wickedness before the Lord. And that's what the Jerusalem Targum said of Nimrod. A Jewish legend stated, the great success that attended all of Nimrod's undertakings preceded a sinister effect. Men no longer trusted in God, but rather in their own prowess and ability and attitude, in which Nimrod tried to convert the whole earth. It's really an interesting thought. Nimrod basically said, I am God. It's kind of a wicked thing, but that's exactly what the Antichrist is going to do, right? He's going to say, I am God. He stands in the temple of God. It tells, Paul tells the Thessalonian church, he will stand in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Now, that man, that Antichrist, will be, as it said back in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, the seed of Satan, the offspring of Satan. And it's very possible that somehow he will be kind of the son of Satan, if you will, in flesh, much like the Nephilim or something like that. Really bizarre stuff. But he's going to show himself that he is God and demand worship from people. And that's what Satan wanted all along, right? I will sit above the stars of God. I will be like the Most High. He wanted to get that worship and the adoration. And that's exactly what Satan will be. That's exactly what Satan wants. That's exactly what the Antichrist will be. And that's exactly what Nimrod wanted. He wanted men to revere him as this one who captured man's soul and basically live by your own strength. And you see this. Have you ever watched the Olympics? You watch the people, they compete, and then they get the microphone in front of them, or like even that America's Got Talent. Remember? Did you see that little girl, that little black girl? I can't remember what her name was like. It was something cute. Anybody remember what her name was? It was something like Saving Grace or some cute little name. And they said something. You got something amazing in you, or something like that. And she says, I got Jesus in me, And she's like, Jesus is in me, not something else, not something great. Jesus is in me, I guess he's great. But you'll see that, when people compete in athletics or they win, they succeed, they stand up in front of that microphone and that reporter sticks it in their face. And some of them say that, I just have to thank God. Jesus Christ is my Savior and my Lord. And it's just awesome. We love that as Christians to watch that and to see somebody react like that. But then you see the other one, and it's subtle. They say, one day I just decided I'm going to believe in myself. I'm going to believe in myself. And that's very subtle, and it seems, almost like, man, they really rose above, but it's the same as Nimrod. It's like, I don't care about God. Rip God. It's me. I'm huge. I'm big. Me. Look what I've accomplished. And yet, God who sits in the heavens, who gives them the breath that they breathe, and the life and the ability that they have, and it's all Him, and they say, I'm wonderful. It's amazing. And it's so tragic. But that's exactly what Nimrod was. He was a self-made man, and he was all about himself. And as the tradition goes, he would have a wife. He would take a wife for himself, this woman by the name of Semiramis. And I'm not exactly sure. Hislop tells it in his Two Babylons or whatever. He talks about it. But the idea was that Nimrod went missing. He was hunting and he went missing. And all of a sudden, after he was gone for 40 days and they'd mourned him and everything, Semiramis mysteriously becomes pregnant. An immaculate conception. She didn't know any man. And she has a baby and she names him Tammuz. He's born on December 25th. Breaks the matrix, comes out. He is the reincarnation, the resurrection of Nimrod, the God-man. Half God, half man. The fulfillment of the ancient prophecies. The one who's come to save us from our sins. This is what the pagans worshipped. As you look at the whole spectrum of from the virgin who bore a son all the way to the conquering lion, lion, the Virgo, the virgin, to the Leo, lion, and all the things that God had promised would happen, from the virgin conceiving a son all the way to the lion who would come back and basically conquer the world, which we see in the Mazzaroth, which is the Jewish zodiac, the uncorrupted gift to mankind as to what God's plans were. And Babylon took the entire thing and morphed it into their own religion. A religion that elevated a virgin who would bear a son. And you'd see, the ancient art of her holding the baby with the halo around her head and the halo around the baby, Tammuz. The Immaculate Conception, the Blessed Virgin, all from paganism, all from a twisting of what God had originally told them, Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, would happen. And He would write the gospel in the stars so that it's amazing. If you look at the book by Bollinger, or I have one in my office called The Heavens Declare, and it's amazing as you look at the Mazzaroth, the Jewish zodiac, and you look from the virgin all the way through, you see how God had shown them very early all the things that He was going to do through His Son, Jesus Christ. He would crush the head of the serpent. He would bear the weight of the world on His shoulders. He would descend into the lower parts of the earth. He would defeat the beast, and He'd come out. You're thinking, Hercules, right? Yeah, Hercules did all those things. It was a knockoff of what God... It was Babylon trying to say, we are the fulfillment of all this. We're the fulfillment of the prophecies. Now, some people say Christianity is a knockoff of paganism. They say, Jesus is just Hercules, or Jesus is just Isis. It's Isis and Horus instead of, the Virgin and Jesus, or there's all the different cultures had their own names for them, Isis and Horus, or I can't remember all of them. I don't remember all of them, but all the different, the Egyptians had Isis and Horus, the Greeks had Diana or Ashtoreth with her son. It was all the same story. It's all paganism, all came from Babylon. All false religion comes from Babylon. And it is a twisting of what God had originally promised us. But Jesus would come into the world and he would actually fulfill all of those prophecies. It's pretty fascinating. Undeniably, as you look at it. But you can see how in the end times, it's really interesting as you look at the book of Revelation, it talks about this mystery Babylon religion. What's it going to be? A lot of people believe it's just the power of the Catholic Church that just brought paganism into the church, right? Okay, well, Jupiter, it's Jesus. That was one of them, Jupiter. Actually, that's what it was. I think it was Ashtaroth and Jupiter. Ashtaroth and Jupiter were the Greek counterparts. And so they would morph that and they'd say, well, okay, let's, the Apostle Paul will be this God, and they just set up idols right there in the church. And they say prayers to them. It's fascinating. There's at the core of Roman Catholicism, Constantine's Christianity would end up being just another form of paganism. And yet, I'm not saying that, people who are Catholic can't come to know Jesus, because I think that many do. But you can see as you just look at the whole construct of it, that it is all just morphed from paganism. And throughout history, as the Catholic Church has kind of ruled, you see these people break off and go back to the Bible and say, what does the Bible say? But that's what Nimrod would start, is basically this religion that would be perpetuated through his son Semiramis, or his wife Semiramis, and her son Tammuz, and claim fulfillment of the prophecy of God, for mankind. But anyway, I digress. It says in verse 13-14, Mizraim begot Ludim, Anamim, Lehabim, Naphtahim, Parthrusim. I'm not pronouncing these right, and neither could you, so it doesn't matter. But from whom came the Philistines and the Caphtorim? Okay, and so these are from Mizraim. These are the people who live in the Egypt area and kind of throughout Africa, would populate throughout Africa. And the sons of Canaan. Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, verse 15, and Heth the Jebusite, and Amorite, and Girgashite, and Hivite, and Arkite, and Sinite, and the Arvadite, and the Zeramite, and the Tikbite, and the Uptite, and the Cellulite, and the Hamathite. Afterwards, the families of Canaan were dispersed, and the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon as you go towards Gerar, as far as Gaza. Then as you go towards Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim, as far as Lesha. So Canaan, he has Sidon. That would be the Sidonian people, which would be Tyre and Sidon, right there by Lebanon. Those were the northernmost people, and they're related to the Hittites, the Lebanese, and then the Sinite. Many people believe that the Sinites were actually the people who went to the Orient and populated China, because the Chinese people, they call themselves the Sinite people. At their root, they believe they came from the Sinites, so they would be descendants of Ham. The spread of the descendants of Ham, verse 20, these were the sons of Ham according to their families, according to their languages and their lands and their nations. So these all had landed in the area of Israel. Most of these people had settled in the area of Israel. And the children were born also to Shem, the father of the son of Eber, a brother of Japheth, and the elder. And the sons of Shem were Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. So this is important, because this line, and I know this is mind-numbing sometimes, but this line is the line of the Messiah. What you have on one side is Ham through Canaan, and kind of the Cush and then the Nimrod, and basically the evil governments of the world, and man's plan for society. And then it's contrasted with God's plan through Shem, where he promises this Messiah is going to come through eventually. So children were born to Shem: Elam, who was the ancestor of the Persian people; Asher, who was the father of the Assyrians; Lud was the father of the Lydians, who lived for a time in Asia Minor; Aram, the father of the Arameans, who are also known as the Syrians; and Arphaxad was the ancestor of Abram and the Hebrews. And so that's kind of interesting. Verse 23, the sons of Aram were Uz, Hul, Gether, and Mash. So they made a TV show out of that guy's last name, Mash, and potatoes. But I'm just trying to make it fun, okay? I'm just trying to make it fun. Uz is an interesting character because he lived in the region of Arabia, but it's very possible that one of his descendants was Job, because you remember that Job 1:1, he lived in the land of Uz. Remember that? And then Arphaxad would be the next, or most important of all these sons that were born. Arphaxad begot Salah. Salah begot Eber. Eber is where we get the term Hebrew. Actually, was derived from that. To Eber were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg. For in his days the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Joktan begot Almodad, Shelef, Hazar Mazath, Jerah, Hadoram, Uzal, Dikla, Obal, all these guys, Abimal, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah. Now those are important names, Ophir and Havilah. They actually, it talks about Solomon going to those places and getting gold. And actually it was interesting because even in the description in the early book of Genesis, when it talks about the Garden of Eden, which of course was destroyed, talks about the rivers that skirted the lands of Havilah, where there was gold and the gold was good. Kind of interesting. And Jobab, and some people say that is Job. It's hard to say. All these were the sons of Joktan, and their dwelling place was from Mesha as you go toward Sephar, the mountains of the east. And so if you're looking at your map here at all, you're kind of seeing where all these people land. You're down here at the bottom, right above, is the Indian Ocean inlet right there by Arabia. That's kind of where you see all these people landing here. Of course, to the west of that is Canaan, and then south of that is Egypt, and where Mizraim is, and Cush would be Ethiopia, and Put would be Libya, areas like that. Anyway, so how far did I get? Oh yeah, okay, I got down to 31. These are the sons of Shem according to their families, according to their languages, in their lands, according to their nations. And so this is basically the people who came. This is after all these people were born after the flood. And these are the families of the sons of Noah according to their generations, in their nations, and from their nations were divided. And from these, the nations were divided on the earth after the flood. And this is exactly how we see, as they start to map these people and where they all live, and what they claim is their lineage and the names of the people that they came from, it all fits within this. And yet we have to remember that it all goes back to Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And you're probably a Gomer, right? A lot of you, Germanic, or French, or Celtic. That's probably my biggest Celtic Finnish, so I'm a little bit of up here, and I think Magog probably is, those peoples. But a little bit of all that, probably from the family of Japheth. That's probably where most of us come from, the oldest son of Noah. That's something, right? But that's where the nations came from. And it's pretty fascinating that we have such an accurate record. Boyce said this. He said, hence one must consider this chapter of Genesis a mirror in which to discern that we human beings are namely creatures so marred with sin that we have no knowledge of our own origin. Not even if God himself, our Creator, unless the Word of God reveals these sparks of divine light to us from afar, this knowledge the Holy Scripture reveals to us. Those who are without them live in error, uncertainty, and boundless ungodliness, for they have no knowledge about whom they are or whence they came. And I think that that's the lesson for us, is that we have to realize that we all came from Adam and Eve, who God placed in the garden, who sinned and failed, and then through through Seth and his line, all the way through until Noah, and Noah and his 3 sons, we all came from that. And Noah and his 3 sons were saved from a flood that destroyed all of mankind because of wickedness. And it was from those 3 sons that the earth would be populated, that the life would go on, and that we would sit here in Emmett today to study the history of our peoples and to know that there is an origin. We didn't come from the banana, right? Like the native peoples thought. We didn't come from a papaya or a boar. We came from God, as he created man in his image and his likeness. And that's so important for us to realize, that we were created in the image of God, and it is for us as people, no matter what we go through, no matter how difficult life gets, that we seek to reflect that image, that we seek to let God shine in us, to clean us out, and to make us what he wants us to be. Let's pray.